Hello and welcome to this next video on DNS security, and now we're going to look at DNS security and the timeouts and making sure that it's all working as it should be working. That way we can test our lookup time and make sure that we're not sort of failing open or failing closed or so on. So once we've got it all configured as we configured it previously, and we've got our DNS being inspected and everything like that, we need to just make sure that we don't have any performance issues. So under device and then content ID, when it comes up, content ID, what we have when it finally stops spinning over is the real-time signature lookup. Okay, so the default time for this is 100 milliseconds, but how can we check and see whether our firewall is doing it in that time? So we'll go to our command line. Okay, log in. Okay, now first one we're going to do is going to look at where it's connecting to, and it will give us a rough sort of idea of what's going on basically. So it's show DNS proxy DNS signature info. Okay, so this gives us our basic sort of response, which is this is what we're connected to: dns.service.palo Alto networks, the telemetry URL, last result is good, last server address, and so on. So what we want to see is we want to see the latency of the lookup. So we want to be able to see whether the latency for the lookup is within our 100 milliseconds, if it's close to 100 milliseconds, and then we can sort of look to work through that. Okay, and to do that, use this command. Signature fqdn www.cisco.com. Okay, so we can see that it looked it up. We can see it's come back as benign, obviously, and it's completing 34 milliseconds. So that is way within our inside of the 100 milliseconds. But of course, that was just on the single one. So there's also counters as well that we can look at. So we can look at, you know, the response time from the counters as well for the API. Okay, and for this, it is predictably DNS proxy signature counters, and the one that we're looking for is this one here, the signature query API. So we can see as with all counters on Palo firewalls, we can see how many requests we've done, the initial connections and the response. We also see a latency here as well. So the maximum was 97 milliseconds. The initial latency was 713 milliseconds, and then it sort of dropped down. But basically, this is the figure we're looking for. So the maximum is 97, which is inside, but it is very close. The average is the minimum is 16 and the average is 34. So we can say then that we're quite happy that we've got a response time that is well within our counters. Okay, so coming back to the firewall again, if we look at how we're going to adjust that, so we just click on that. Now the setting is between 0 and 60,000, so we could up that to 200 quite easily, and it's basically the amount of time it's gonna wait for that response to come back. If the response doesn't come back within this signature lookup, then it just releases the DNS response. So it just sends a DNS response back to the client, and we just click OK, and then we commit the policy based on that. And just because what I wanted to do is I wanted to create a contrast as well. So as things going, because obviously 10.1 is end of life, the end of this year. 10.2 isn't massively different in the way that you look at the web UI and the way the options are presented. So I don't know necessarily is as much need to compare it to 10.2. Obviously underneath there was a lot of other features, and 10.2 in my opinion is better than 10.1. But on the 11 and 11.1 versions, you can see we've got a much more comprehensive amount of real-time signatures. That's because a lot more things are done in real time. So if we compare the real-time signature lookup there to here, we've just got the DNS signature lookup, whereas here we've got the DNS signature lookup, hold for the Wildfire real-time signature lookup, so you can hold the file for that, and then the Wildfire real-time signature lookup timeout as well, and then the action on the real-time. So once this is exceeded, if we haven't got a response back from Wildfire, do we reset both or do we just allow? So it's basically back in the old days of, do we fail open or do we fail closed? And this as well extends down to the URL inline cloud categorization and the Wildfire inline cloud analysis. So it's all, you know, it's all, there's more and more stuff basically. There's more and more stuff you can do. You can also see here as well, I don't know if I mentioned this previously, but we'll do whilst I'm here, is, so prior to 11, the appending trailing slashes you can see here on the URL filtering was done by default. So it was there, you could add it, but it was by default at the end. Now, to give you a greater control over that, you can either choose to append the trailing slash or not. So if you choose not to, then it will not append that automatically to the end of your URLs, your FQDNs that you put in. Okay, so just to further sort of discuss it as well. So going through the documentation for bypassing DNS security, is if we go to the anti-spyware profile that this is configured in, remember DNS security is pretty much enforced through the anti-spyware. The recommendation, and I just find it a little bit bizarre that they had to go to the trouble of doing this. So the recommendation to bypass the DNS security is to simply change all the policy actions to none, remove all of the packet captures to disable, and then ergo that then removes your DNS security, which I mean didn't really take, I don't think it took any explanation, but that would then remove your DNS security from that anti-spyware profile. You then save that anti-spyware profile, and then that rule is then the DNS security is bypassed. Another point as well, you can also change this. So you can use any address that you want, any address that's not going to return a DNS reply, obviously. But for reporting purposes, it has to be across the firewall. So it has to be inter-zone as opposed to intra-zone for it to be logged. So of course monitoring as well. So we need to be able to monitor this. So if we go to our monitor tab, and as we said before, these types of threats come up in the threat log, ironically enough. So we've got all the threats there, so you can search through. So again, you can get the packet captures if you have the packet capture enabled. You can also create a report. So if you go to Manage Custom Reports, we can add a report. So let's call this our DNS security report, and we need to select the database. So we're going to select the threat database, or we can go with the detailed logs on the threat database. Then we're going to go for we'll go for last 24 hours. We can schedule it as well, so we can schedule it for last calendar day, last 7 days, and then it will run. So when you're going to commit something and sometimes you're stuck behind a report, that's the firewall running these reports, or Panorama running these reports. So if we go for last 7 days, so we're going to sort by, so we drop this down, so we're either going to have the count, users, number of source profile, number of destination profile. So we're going to we'll go for count, do the top 500, even though there's not 500 on here, and then we group it by, should we group it by source IP, if it's in here, source address, group it by source address, and then 10 groups. And also on this side we can select what columns these available columns based on what the database is that we're looking at. If I can just remember my alphabet, so threat category, threat ID name, threat type. Okay, and we're going to go for source address, add that as well. Now we can run that now. Okay, now that's run, so we can see it's been running. We can see that it's all come from our one source address because because it is. So we can export that to PDF, or we can export it to XML or export to CSV. And once we've exported it, then we can open it up and we can look at it. But what we can also do as well is we can schedule this for the 7 days. So we're going to click OK. And we're going to pop that there. So now it's going to appear in the report. So once our reports are run, then they will appear here in the application, the reports at the side. So your different sets of reports. And again with the reports, so we can click into it, and we know that we run these reports on a daily basis. So we can have a look at, say, threat reports for the 19th, for instance. So we can see that there was a vulnerability there, the ID of that vulnerability. If we want to look at URL filtering, so if we go for the 21st, which is yesterday, say, because these are run daily, go for the 21st, and we can look at command and control now with sort of categories and things like that. So we can then click into that as well, and it'll take us to the ACC. The ACC is a wonderful screen where you can start to look at application usage, threat activity. You can create new ones of these as well, so you can start to use the ACC to really understand what's going on in your network. A custom period. The custom period has been set because it's the report length. So we've got the network activity, any threats or URLs, user activity. So if you've got the user here as well, so it'd have the user name, source IP, so the Windows desktop, because it's going to resolve it, and then you've got the 192.168.50.10, and then where it was going to, which is all the testing that we've done with Palo Alto. Additionally, you have a map of where it's going to, and again you can filter that by sessions and threats and so on. So running the reports gives you the opportunity not only to control and look at your DNS, but also to monitor it and see who's going where and which users are making those calls. Okay, so that's it for the DNS security, and I will see you in the next set of videos.